Hi, Michael Buffer here, and let's get ready for Stat Sports.
Here's your host, Rob Lepelstadt.
And we're back here on Stat Sports. Let's get ready to rumble. With those 5 words, you know exactly who and what I'm talking about. Inside the boxing ring on a Saturday night in Las Vegas with legendary ring announcer Michael Buffer. And that's why it's such an honor and a pleasure to have him on the show. Michael, how are you?
I'm good. Good to talk to you.
Really appreciate the time. Gennady Golovkin, Triple G, is set to fight Steve Rose at Madison Square Garden this weekend. And as someone who's announced basically all of his fights, who better to get some perspective on this bout than yourself? Golovkin is 38-1-1, coming off the first loss of his career, that controversial decision to Canelo Alvarez back in September. Just, Michael, what can we expect from Triple G in this fight versus Steve Rose at MSG?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna see Triple G in his usual drama mode, where he just is an exciting fighter. He presses for the knockout. He's got power in both hands, and the 2 fights with Canelo Alvarez are behind him, and he knows he has to move on. He's got a great deal with DAZN for, I think it's a three-fight deal, 6-fight, I don't know, but I know it's $100 million, and it's he's inspired and really looking forward to moving on. He's changed trainers. He's not going to be with his longtime trainer, and Jonathan Banks is training him, who trained Vladimir Klitschko for his last 4 or 5 fights. So, I'm looking forward to it. One of the things that I think really adds to a great night of boxing is when it's in Madison Square Garden. The venue itself is a star, and I think all fighters really gravitate toward to trying to be a part of a fight in the Garden. So it's just something that I think fans can really enjoy when they tune in and watch on DAZN this weekend with Gennady. And if you have DAZN, you can look at the replay again of last week's fight and all the fights they've had over the past year on DAZN. So, the Garden is definitely a star. But, I hear a lot about Steve Rose, and he's a very good boxer. He's undefeated in 19 fights, 19-0. Not the same firepower of Triple G. He's got 10 KOs, but I hear he's a really, really good boxer with good defensive skills. So it's a good test for Triple G to come off his first loss.
Now, to the mainstream boxing fans, Steve Rose is relatively unknown. And as we saw last weekend at MSG, you were there for Andy Ruiz Jr.'s stunning upset over Anthony Joshua for the heavyweight championship of the world, that anything is possible. Just what chance does Rose have to shock the world and pull that upset against Triple G Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, Andy Ruiz Jr. had no chance going into that fight, right? And all the interviews I did leading up to that fight, especially this is true in the heavyweight division, if a guy over 200 pounds hits you, actually I believe Angelo Dundee said, if a woman over 200 pounds hits you just right, you're going to be in trouble. And it's really true, and he landed that. He got up off the canvas in round 3, Ruiz Jr. He's got faster hands than people realize. He actually has good defensive skills, and he moves well for a guy that carries all that weight. And it kind of makes you really take a good look at things when the NFL loves to draft nose tackles and offensive linemen that weigh, in the neighborhood of 300 and 320 pounds. And here this kid at 6'2", 268, moving with a lot of extra weight around his middle. It just doesn't seem to bother him. He's proved to be very athletic, and he has a great chin. So I think Steve Rose is going to have to show that he has, a good set of whiskers too, because that's one thing that Canelo Alvarez proved, is that in addition to being a superstar, I mean, definitely a big-time fighter, he has a great chin, because in both of those fights with Gennady, he took unbelievable shots that would have dropped anybody else.
And it's so funny, Michael, because the second after the fight happens, everyone wants to try to put it into historical perspective. For you, where does the Andy Ruiz Jr. upset over Anthony Joshua rank all time?
You know, as I speak to you, I'm going to probably say it's the biggest upset I've ever worked.
Wow.
I'd have to sit down and go over 37 years
Sure.
of fights and look back on a few, and there have been some, of course, and they're not all there for a spontaneous evaluation, but I'm just having a hard time trying to think of something that big of an upset where a heavyweight fighter with maybe a couple days shy of 4 full weeks' notice got a chance to fight for the unified heavyweight championship and pulled off an upset and pretty much of a dominant performance when you consider 4 knockdowns and ending in round 7.
The legendary ring announcer Michael Buffer here with us on Stat Sports. And I've got to know, just how did you come up with your signature catchphrase, "Let's get ready to rumble"?
Well, when I first started, it was somehow it evolved where ring announcers were introducing everybody that has an official credential at ringside. In other words, let's just say it would be in New Jersey, and you have a chairman, you'd have an executive officer, you have 4 commissioners, and it's a deputy commissioner or 2, 3 judges, the referee, 4 ringside doctors, and they all got introduced before the fight. And so what was happening, fighters were coming to the ring, and in the 70s and 80s, it started out where they, used the music, the big entrance, the spotlight, and the crowd gets amped up. They get excited. Boxing is all about excitement, and it gets generated by those big entrances. And the ring announcer, myself included, killed the crowd by introducing, and one time I actually counted this up, 19 people. I actually
Oh, wow.
19 people before the stars of the show.
Exactly.
And I kind of wanted something that was, as a fan, even as a kid, I used to love to watch the baseball All-Star game and to see each team line up. The American League will say on the third base line, and then the National League, depending on what the home stadium was, on the first base line, and tipping their caps and getting their just applause. And I just thought it was thrilling to have the stars of the game, the stars of the show, to get those introductions. And the same thing in boxing. I can remember watching the Friday night fights, and before the main event, they'd introduce Sugar Ray Robinson and Rocky Marciano, and they'd come into the ring. And so I just always loved that moment of the introduction of the guys you want to see, not the staff or the front office from the commission. So I wanted to bring the crowd back, because we've killed the crowd, we've killed the house. I wanted to have that gentlemen start your engines moment, where when you hear those words at any auto race, the Indy 500, of course, being the big one, everybody goes crazy because they know the race is going to begin. So I wanted something that would let the fans know and get them back into the game with meeting the stars of the fight.
Yeah, I imagine 19 people. It's kind of tough to get the crowd back into it after that, for sure.
Yeah, those crickets were, they were pretty loud.
When you step inside the ring and you're about to announce a fight, and with the lights and the music and the whole atmosphere, just what goes through your mind in that moment?
Yeah, I still get excited. I like what I do. I've got a great job. It started out as a part-time job to do for fun, and the power of TV just made it take off for me. And as a fan, there's a lot of times where I know it's going to be a good one, and I can't wait to wrap up the introductions and go sit in my seat and watch the fight. So it's still something I enjoy doing and I love. And, I have certain preparations. We have TV involved always, so I've got to make sure my introductions and are coordinated with the production team, make sure we have the right judges in the right order, that they show their names on the screen, that sort of thing, and which corner is going to be introduced first. And just, things like that. But aside from those logistical things, I just pretty much write down my own introductions and take it from there.
Now, it's so fascinating, Michael, because your brother, your half-brother, Bruce, is the iconic voice of the Octagon. He has his own iconic catchphrase, "It's time," and he says it a lot more enthusiastic than I just did there. But he's also the president and the CEO of your company, Let's Rumble, where you actually trademarked your signature catchphrase. And it's crazy because you guys actually didn't meet until you were 49 years old. Your brother, your half-brother, Bruce, was 30. Just what's the story behind how you guys finally met, the two iconic voices in boxing and UFC, respectively?
Well, we have the same dad. I was born on 1944, as just a few months after D-Day, which, of course, today's the 75th anniversary of that just fantastic invasion of Normandy. And I was watching some of the stuff on TV today with some of those great veterans that are still with us, and it was very moving. But yeah, my biological mom and dad got married during World War II, like probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of others at age 18 and 19. And when he came back from the USS Bennington aircraft carrier in the Pacific, they literally didn't know each other, and I was a baby, and they separated, and I went to live with foster parents. I always knew my real mother growing up. I was raised with, I lucked out and had a Leave It to Beaver life in Philadelphia during the 50s, and with a great family who I always refer to as my mother and father, and stayed with them my whole life. But when I was never legally adopted, so when I went into the Army, I grew up and had a Social Security number and graduated from high school under the name of Michael Huber, Huber. And when I went into the Army, when they were, they were drafting everybody like crazy in 1965. When I was 20, I enlisted in the Army. And the day I went to get sworn in, they, of course, they had to do a search on your birth certificate, and they said, well, pal, and I always knew my real name, but they said, well, you have to go with the name Buffer. We had to search your birth certificate, make sure you're not a communist spy, and so that's when I became Michael Buffer. And after 3 years in the Army, I got out and didn't feel like going through the legal process of changing it or anything. And so, as luck would have it, 20 years later, 20-plus years later, I got a phone call at a venue where I'm doing a fight. It says, Joe Buffer called. I knew who he was. I knew the name. I said, give him a call. It was a phone number. So that's how we reconnected. Power of TV, right?
Yeah, seriously. What's your relationship like, you two, you and Bruce?
Oh, we have a great relationship. Bruce and his brother Brian, their dad, my dad, went on and married a sweet little Italian lady from Philadelphia who is still with us, and she's my little mama. So, I ended up pretty lucky. I ended up with 3 moms and 2 dads, and gained a couple of great brothers. So it's worked out real well for me.
Michael, you've accomplished so much in your career. You're an iconic boxing voice. You've announced the biggest fights in the world. You're the best of the best in your industry. Just at this point in your career, with everything that you have accomplished, what drives you?
Well, a strange turn of events over the last couple of years, because last year I actually had contemplated, and I said, well, I'll be 75 in November this year. So last year, 2018, I thought, that's time to retire. And
75 is a nice number.
Yeah, well, I would have been 74 and change and retired last year. And I had started like about four and a half years ago doing fights with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing in the UK. And they came to me in the middle of last year and said, listen, we've got something coming up that we'd like you to be a part of and be exclusive with us and DAZN, DAZN, the streaming service. And we put together a bunch of numbers and that sort of thing and made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I'm going to be sticking around for a few more years.
Yeah, it's awesome, and obviously,
You know, it's crazy though. That happened like in the middle of last year, and I made this deal, signed a contract. First time in my life I'd ever been exclusive. I always worked for the promoters. A lot of people think
Sure.
that I was with HBO, but no, I worked on every network there is, and so a few months after DAZN made their announcement, and you know, I had signed with them, HBO actually decided to get out of the boxing business. So it's just crazy, and the way things turn out.
Really do appreciate you taking the time, Michael. Michael, I feel like if there's anyone that's qualified to answer this question, it has to be you. You know, you've announced so many iconic and big-time fights all over the world. Just in your mind, who's the greatest boxer of all time?
You know, courtesy of growing up in the 50s and watching black and white TV and the Friday and Saturday night fights, and today with YouTube, it gives me a chance to look at a lot of other great fighters. I love looking at the old fights, and you know, my favorite of all times would have to be Muhammad Ali. I was a total Ali addict from the Olympics, 1964 Olympics on. But pound for pound, I don't think anyone could ever doubt that the best fighter ever would be Sugar Ray Robinson. Here's a guy that was 40-0, had actually was a welterweight, and he fights Jake LaMotta for the second time. He had beaten him, and he loses his first fight. Now, he gives away 13, 14 pounds. They have a rematch 21 days later, and Ray wins. Now, that's unreal 21 days later. But Robinson fights a 10-rounder in between, and after the rematch with LaMotta, which he won, he goes undefeated for his next 80 fights. I mean, it's just an absolutely unbelievable fighter, and you know, he becomes welterweight world champion and 5-time middleweight world champion, and just you go and tell anybody, go to YouTube and look at Sugar Ray Robinson, and I think you might agree, the best ever.
Before we let you go, Michael, you know, the modern-day all-time great boxer has to be Floyd Mayweather Jr., and he's 50-0. He's undefeated. Just for you, you've been there for so many, if not all, of his fights. Where does Floyd rank all-time?
Final thing here before I let you go. I'm just fascinated here. You know, you think about the modern day boxer and everything that Floyd Mayweather has accomplished, 50-0, undefeated. Where does he fall in the equation in your mind?
A great fighter. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Great fighter, a brilliant tactician, great boxing IQ, a great defensive fighter. You can look at him today, not a mark on his face. I definitely would have to put him in my top 10 without, you know, I can put Ray Robinson at the top, and then, you know, you're going to have in that mix Sugar Ray Leonard would have to be one of the best fighters we've ever seen in the last 50 years. Roberto Duran, marvelous Marvin Hagler, Muhammad Ali. I think Evander Holyfield, pound for pound, is one of the all-time greats because he was an undisputed cruiserweight champion and then 5-time heavyweight champion. Mike Tyson, the younger version before he was incarcerated, was just an unbelievably dominant fighter with fast hands and power, and just a lot of great fighters that I've had the pleasure to introduce in my career, and a lot of great ones out there. But yeah, Floyd is definitely among the best.
The legendary ring announcer Michael Buffer. Michael, really appreciate the time. Means a lot. Thank you so much.
Great to talk to you. You take care now.
You too.